worst helicopter crashes in history. The helicopter history has seen its fair share of triumphs, but unfortunately, it has also suffered many tragedies. In this video, we're going to talk about the 10 most tragic incidents in helicopter history. 1968, Vietnam. CH-53A Sea Stallion. The Vietnam War has been famous for its use of military helicopters, and unsurprisingly, the war has had its fair share of helicopter-related tragedies. One of the notable crashes took place on January 8, 1968, when the helicopter crashed in the Hai Long Forest, which caused the deaths of all the 46 passengers on board. After 10 days, the SAR team found the heavily charred remains of the crash. The incident happened during a routine transport operation, and the main cause of the crash reported was poor weather. 1977, Israel. CH-53D Sea Stallion. On May 10, 1977, another CH-53 tragedy occurred when a stallion flew into a hill in West Bank during an exercise in the Jordan Valley. This resulted in the deaths of all 54 people on board. The adversity lingered in the collective Israeli consciousness, as it became known as Asan Hunan Dalat, the disaster of the 54. Although Palestinian and Jordanian terrorist activity was considered a possibility of this crash at that time, but the ultimate cause of this tragedy was never definitively proven. The news reported the stallion rose a few hundred yards into the air before suddenly losing altitude. 1981, England. Westland Wessex 60. On August 13, 1981, the helicopter in question in this incident was a British variant of the Sikorsky H-34, which lost its power to its main rotor gearbox. This caused the pilots to lose control of the plane near Bacton, Norfolk. 2 pilots and almost 11 gas workers on board were lost. As the recovery efforts were delayed, it resulted in the crash being beyond the possibility of recovery by the time rescue operations were begun. The consequence of this was that the cause of the wreck was never definitively proven. The memorial to the tragedy was unveiled on August 13, 2014, with the Eastern Daily Press running a story about the effects of the crash 3 decades later. 1983, England. Sikorsky S-61. Another British helicopter tragedy happened just 2 years later, on 16 July 1983, when the helicopter crashed in the southern area of the Celtic Sea while it was traveling from Penzance to St. Mary's off the coast of Sicily near Cornwall. There were 26 passengers on board, from which almost 20 lost their lives. There was an immediate investigation conducted by the Accidents Investigation Branch, which reported that the incident was due to pilot error, resulting from the failure to notice poor weather conditions. Another reason cited was the failure to monitor flight instruments properly and a lack of height warning equipment on board. The AIB made 8 recommendations to address helicopter safety, from which 7 of them were adopted. 1986, Scotland. Boeing 234LR Chinook. It was one of the deadliest helicopter disasters which occurred on November 6, 1986. It involved a Chinook crashing into the sea around Sumburgh Airport, Shetland Islands. The Chinook sank into the sea right after the crash, approximately 2.5 miles away from the runway where it was supposed to land originally. The helicopter was carrying workers from an oil field in Brent, and all of the 45 people on board passed away. An investigation in the crash found that the helicopter in question suffered a catastrophic forward transmission failure, which resulted in a desynchronization of the twin motors, causing the Chinook's blades to collide. 1997, Israel. Sikorsky S-65C-3. On 17 August 1997, another tragedy took place when 2 Sikorsky S-65C-3s crashed in the security zone of Israel's southern border of Lebanon. It resulted in the death of all 73 Israeli staff members on board. The wreck received national attention and mourning. An investigation took place, and even though the cause of the crash has never been proven, the governmental commission ruled out the likelihood of a mechanical failure of the 2 helicopters. However, the investigation did find that the first helicopter's main rotor struck the other, causing it to crash, and the second tried to help. 2002, Russia. MiL Mi-26. The crash took place during the Second Chechen War, and it occurred just east of Grozny in Chechnya with a Mi-26, the largest military helicopter in the world, carrying about 152 soldiers and passengers. The worst part is the helicopter didn't just crash, but it was wrecked in a minefield after it was struck by a shoulder-fired 9K-38 heat-seeking surface-to-air missile fired by Chechen separatists. After 2 years, a 27-year-old resident of Grozny was suspected to be connected to this case. Later, he was arrested for, quote, an act of terror. 2007, Sierra Leone, Mi-8. Another tragedy ensued when an Mi-8 helicopter crashed in an area close to Lungi International Airport in Sierra Leone on 3rd of June 2007. The crash is thought to have resulted in the death of 22 passengers. The passengers were Togolese football fans who were returning home from a match, along with 2 Ukrainian pilots. One of them survived, who was a co-pilot. The ruins burned for more than 40 minutes as the firefighters struggled to get to the scene. However, the airport staff attempted to control the fire themselves by dousing it with buckets of water. 2009, Venezuela, Mi-35. On May 3, 2009, one of the worst helicopter disasters of South America occurred when an Mi-35 military helicopter crashed near Táchira in Venezuela. This resulted in a death of all 17 members on board, including a brigadier general and 1 civilian. The cause of the tragedy remained unsolved. However, poor weather conditions was cited as a possibility. Another controversial fact is that the incident happened days after Álvaro Uribe, president of Colombia at the time, appealed for Venezuelan assistance in dealing with guerrilla forces on the Venezuelan side of their border. 2020, USA, Sikorsky S-76B. As most of the crashes are notable for their high death toll, this crash will be remembered in large part due to a single death of NBA legend Kobe Bryant. Adding to this tragedy, his daughter, Gianna, and many others lost their lives. The incident occurred on January 26, 2020, when the helicopter crashed into a hillside in Calabasas. The helicopter in question was notable for being one with an exceptionally strong safety record. After an investigation, poor visibility conditions were cited as a potential cause of the tragedy. The tragedy touched the whole country, as it set off a wave of memorials not just in the NBA, but in the MLB, NFL, NHL, and European soccer, with AC Milan honoring Kobe before a match days later. Presidents Trump, Obama, and Clinton, then candidate Biden, and California Governor Gavin Newsom all made a statement about the tragedy.